Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Land Your Ground. This is the video podcast where we focus on landowners. We hear land stories and focus on the rural lifestyle. We're on a mission to motivate people, inspire people, and educate people who are on their own land journey. So we appreciate you sticking with us today. And
we're going to have some cool conversations about Midwest land ownership today.
Yes, we are. Yep. I'm your host, Chase Burns, and this is Jordan Sheese here with me today. And I'm excited about a lot of the things we're going to chit chat on. What's coming up around the corner here, Jordan?
Christmas. And I am excited about it.
You just have to say the word Christmas and I start smiling. Like I'm a kid about Christmas time.
Yeah, it's because you think about it, you might get a couple nice presents, right?
There's still hope.
There is still hope.
I kind of forget about that and think, oh, I'm old. I don't get presents anymore. And then my wife said something the other day about, well, we've already done all your Christmas shopping. We have your gifts. And I was like, whoa, wait
a minute.
I'm getting gifts? Like there's gifts? Which means I still have more shopping to do, because if I'm getting gifts, that means other people need gifts too. So.
Yeah. And I always I'm in a terrible state of every year. I find out about my Christmas presents before,
spoilers.
Well before Christmas. And it stemmed from, I don't know if it's just because my folks are bad about it, because they're like, well, we got you this, you could use it now. Why don't you just have it now?
That happens. It's adult life, I think. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, you're getting a new coat for Christmas. Oh, by the way, it's 10 degrees out. So you should just wear this coat rather than let it lay under the tree for another 20 days.
Right.
That's a rough part about being an adult. You don't always, it's like sometimes you get the really practical thing. But what did you just tell me that you wanted for Christmas?
I would very much like some socks for Christmas because
nobody says that.
Yeah. Well, that was my original wish for Christmas, was socks, until I found all of my socks in my closet after probably a year. I thought I was out of them and I wasn't, but
well, at least they showed up.
Yeah.
They're handy to have for sure. So yes, very excited about Christmas. Have a couple boys that are, still young enough to be all giddy about stockings in the morning and just, we've gone to hosting the last couple of years, which I love. I love Christmas morning, having my folks and my grandma and, my in-laws, Jackie's parents. She's an only child, so it's pretty easy to persuade them that they should just come to us on Christmas Day and get to, cook a big old breakfast. I love breakfast and I love Christmas. So like doing both of them in our own house is just awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. We're hosting, I think, so we've got, huge family. So trying to get everybody together all at the same time is hard, because there's my grandpa and his daughters and all their kids, and then there's my great uncle's side, so that like his brother and then all of his kids, and then there's the Sheese side of the family where we've got to get together with my dad's two brothers and all their kids, and it's really hard to get them all bunched into one.
Who's got the space for that?
You
just gotta get comfortable, get cozy, and don't worry about space.
Yeah.
When it's the holidays, you're not allowed to have personal space. You just everybody on top of each other.
No. So we're hosting the big family one. My folks are going to host the both sides of both Anderson families, and the Andersons and the Friedens are going to come over, and we're all going to get together. But then one of my aunts is hosting just the Anderson Christmas to kind of condense it a little bit, make it easier for everybody to get in and have somewhere to sit. Really,
right. Something a little more private.
Yeah. So it's gonna be a good holiday season. Really looking forward to it. I'm hopefully going to do a little traveling around New Year's. I've got some friends down in the Columbia area, like Jeff
going
City.
to Missouri.
Yep, and they have a New Year's party that they have every single year for the last. I think when he put the Facebook post out, it said like 8 years or something like that. They've been doing that, and it's a really fun time. And I didn't get to go for the last. Oh man, it's probably been since 2020 started.
Yeah.
That was the last one that I was going to go to, and I haven't been able to go since. So I'm hoping to finally get back down there, but it's a bit of a haul. We'll see if my back will handle that.
Yeah. Nope. Well, that's exciting, man. That's awesome. That's the best part about Christmas and New Year's. It's just the family get-togethers and spending time with cousins and all the people that you chat maybe with a couple of them individually here or there throughout the year if you're like me, but to get everybody together in one gathering and sit around and play card games or whatever
Hmm.
all evening, that kind of stuff. I hear that a lot. Maybe that's a Midwest thing. I don't, do people do that elsewhere across the country? People go and like
Oh, I don't know.
have a big dinner and then they just sit around and visit and after presents and all that stuff. And then they bust out either like a board game trivia or they do like start playing euchre or pitch or something.
Yeah.
That's what we do
What's
anyway.
what's your guys' favorite card game then? What do you
So
play?
we grew up playing pitch, but now everybody plays euchre around here. So I mean,
Yeah.
my family never played euchre. I never even tried it until.
So there are three different, I think, games that we play. So like the Anderson side, they like to play, oh no, I'm going to have this backwards. The She side I know plays canasta. We play canasta. Some people call it hand and foot, or they're two different games, but they're similar. And then the other side likes to play, I can't even remember the name of it. I'm not any good at it, is all
Yeah.
I know. But we've got, every part of the family's got a different board game or a card game or something that they really enjoy. And we always do that at the end of dinner when everybody's just sitting around digesting.
Yep. Yep. Well, that's good. That's good. So aside from Christmas coming up, in our last episode, we touched a little bit on the seasonality of farmland sales. And that was a topic that you kind of told me afterwards or said somewhere in the middle of that episode. You were like, I really had no idea that was even a thing. I didn't realize that like wintertime brings about a whole lot more of the tillable farmland sales versus, the rest of the year when, most of that doesn't change hands. So it's more, recreational type land has its hot seasons as well, like from July 4th through basically about the first week of November or so. That's peak time to sell that type of farm. But then we get into this time of year and we start seeing more farmland sales happening. And so that was a topic that like after our last episode that I got to thinking about a little bit more. It was like, I wonder how many of our listeners and our viewers, how many people out there really don't know that much about the farmland sales stuff. And so I keep thinking about what is the general public saying about farmland sales? And there's a hot button topic that comes up if you do a quick Google search or search it on social media. I mean, you search farmland for sale and there's going to be a word a lot of times that comes up in the headline with it that's either starts with a C or starts with a B. And it's amazing to me how many people who have nothing to do with farming or real estate sales or purchasing or whatever, but will still approach me. And one of the first things out of their mouth is like, well, how's the market going? And then they say, why are all the billionaires buying up all this farm ground? And I mean, that comes up over and over and over again. You've heard it too, right?
I've absolutely heard it. I mean, you see articles get passed around. Sometimes people are like, it's terrible that there's so many big corporations and whatnot buying up all this farmland because it's putting down the little guy farmers, or you see it everywhere.
Everybody's got opinions about it,
and everybody
right?
has an opinion on it. Yep.
Yeah. So there's this I almost want to say hysteria, but it's just this buzz about farmland, and every time there's a Class A or high quality farm that sells, there's a lot of speculation, and somebody will say like, well, is Bill Gates going to buy it? And they just, because they hear these things or they read it or whatever, and they feel like that those, some people use the term elites, but let's just say, the top 1%ers or whatever in the country, that people extremely high net worth, that they have this perception that those people are now all of a sudden in the land market and they're just out there gobbling up and buying up every tillable farm that sells, which just isn't the case. But it kind of put me on this course the last week or two of really like jumping in and reading some of the articles that are out there and stuff to see like, well, what are people really saying about that? Mm-hmm. And I found some of them pretty interesting, but I shot a couple over your way and I thought maybe it would be interesting, to just kind of dissect a couple of them or touch on some of the points and see what some of the facts or some of the stats that we were able to turn up with a little bit of Google searching, which is dangerous.
It is very dangerous. I was going to say, because it's like I Googled who owns the most farmland in the U.S. and I got one answer. It said Bill Gates owns 270,000 some farmland, acres. And then you've seen them, the little drop down that's right underneath of it,
Sure,
like with
yep.
another similar question.
Yep. Alternative results.
Yep. And that it said how much farmland does Jeff Bezos own? And it said 420,000 acres. Well, it doesn't really line up for Bill Gates being the biggest farmland owner in the U.S. If Jeff Bezos owns
Right. Yes.
200,000 more than him. But
Right. So there's a lot of incomplete information from each of these sources. So it's interesting. I mean, if you really have to find the most credible source you could if you really wanted to dig into it and make sure that your list was accurate. But I don't think we're that worried about really the nuts and bolts of, who owns more than somebody else by 1,000 or 5,000 or even 25,000 acres. In the grand scheme of things, I mean, for the topic, for sake of this conversation, I think it would be fun, maybe, or at least a little bit intriguing to look at what some of those lists look like, because there are some surprises on there, and some things in there that that we certainly that caught us off guard, regardless of if the number is exactly on the money today or if it's outdated by 6 months or 8 months, 12 months, whatever. And that's some of it. Like land, especially in investor hands, does change hands a lot more often than it does when it's in the hands of a private producer. So if we're talking about finding one source that said Bill Gates owned 241,000 acres of tillable farmland, well, that was maybe 18 to 20 months ago. And then if you found one that was dated of June of this year, it might be like 271,000. So is he buying a whole bunch? Well, then you could find another source that was dated in December of this year that's back down to like 260. So the number is fluid, I think, is one way to look at it. It doesn't, and depending on exactly when that data was collected, how accurate
even then it could have been outdated. I mean, it could have been when it gets collected. That's just, the most recent report that they have. It's it's just what's up to date is kind of what you said, fluid.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. So one of the articles, should we touch on that Forbes article?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Forbes article that we turned up that was actually a little bit earlier this year. This was March of 2023, but just a buzz of a headline. I mean, it opens with how much U.S. farmland does China really own? More than Bill Gates and less than 17 other countries was the byline. So, and I didn't want to jump into talking too much about China buying farmland quite yet. We'll get to that a little bit later, maybe in the episode here. But it's funny to me that even in the headline, they answer the question by saying more than Bill Gates, but less than all of these other people. And so then as you scroll down a little bit further deeper into the article, it finally does start to say, who are these other people or entities that own so much land in the United States, which is interesting. So we should definitely touch on those. But then it talks about Bill Gates because it brought him into the conversation, because that's a name that comes up constantly when people are talking about, who are these billionaires buying up all this farmland? And it talks a little bit about how many acres he actually owned at this point. Again, this was March 2023. And it was saying that he owns almost as much as China at 248,000 acres. And that was according to the land report. But that would put him actually still at number 41 on the land report's list, last year's list of Americans who own the most land. So there are 40 other people who own more land in the United States than Bill Gates does.
Was that people or corporations and entities included?
Landowners. I shouldn't say people. You're right. Landowners. Okay, so that could be a corporate entity. That could be, could be a private person that uses a singular corporate entity, or it could be an investment corporation, et cetera. But they've named him, or then his name keeps coming up because of his land holdings, which is substantial. Such a portion of it is tillable farmland. And so they pointed him out as being one of the number one on the list of people who own the most ag acres, basically, that are in tillable or row crop production of some kind. And that's not all in the Midwest, actually. If we floated over to
I've got those numbers here.
You want to hit those?
Yeah, we were talking about the ones specifically, the
Illinois
landowners in Illinois. Yep.
Yeah, because that's where we're located. I mean, these numbers are going to be similar. Actually, I did find another source for Iowa, but we're Illinois here, so that's what we're going to highlight. And if whether his number is 241,000 acres nationwide, or if it's now closer to 270,000, and this is as of December in 2023. But go ahead and hit. Who are the top 5? Here they are.
The top 5 at number 1, and this blew me away. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, otherwise known as the Mormon Church, own the most land in Illinois at 38,000 acres, which is, I wasn't prepared for that to be the number 1. That's not what I expected.
You didn't think it was going to be a church, probably that was the number 1 landowner in
No,
Illinois.
but apparently they own a lot of property all over the world. Not even just in the U.S. But number 2 came in the Scully family, and I think you said you knew where they were located.
I thought that was Lakin County, not Lakin. Hold on, I will find it. Logan County. Yeah,
gotcha.
So. And that's, most of their land is located there in Logan County. That family apparently, and how many acres they have now?
30,000.
30,000. And it used to be quite a bit more than that at one point, which, reading the history on that family was really interesting. I guess it said that at one point that family owned about 211,000, but some of that was in Kansas and Missouri, Nebraska, and Illinois. So it was kind of scattered all over the Midwest. And then at this point now it's there's still 2 brothers that are sole heirs or controllers of the land trusts that the Scully family put all that land into. But interesting history. I mean, they started here, I think, in the mid 1800s is when they moved here, immigrated to America and started buying up some low-lying swampland and making it good tillable dirt and just kept building that empire.
That's pretty cool. I mean, to think about, especially when it's in the hands of a family that's, been here for such a long time.
Right.
Think about the stories they could tell about if they had
for sure. Would love to hear their land stories.
Absolutely we would. Number 3 came in with a name Shahid Khan at 24,000 acres. And he's a gentleman that he's a self-made billionaire, if I remember reading it right.
Yep.
And he owns Flexen Gate based out of Urbana here in Illinois.
Yep, correct.
If I understand correct. And then number 4, surprise, comes in at Bill Gates.
At how many acres?
17,940. Almost, what would that put it at? Like almost 7,000 acres less than the number 3 spot.
Yeah, and half of what the Mormon Church owns.
Yep. And then number 5, Farmland Partners at 12,070.
Right, which I've had some experience with Farmland Partners. Paul Pittman, the gentleman who founded that, really cool guy to listen to. I was at an event several years back where he was the keynote speaker. Talked about his family history, his growing up on a farm and that sort of thing. But what Farmland Partners kind of evolved into became what is called a REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust. And it's unique and it's pretty interesting that basically it's a real estate mutual fund. So, and it's publicly traded. So, you can buy shares of the company that owns all of this farmland and they own farmland, I think, all over the Midwest and all the way up to Michigan and all the way down to Georgia, I think. So they're kind of all over the place. But because, the guy who kind of started it was located in Fulton County, Illinois, they still have a good amount of holdings here in tillable farms in the Midwest and in Illinois.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually, before we started discussing this, I hadn't heard of a REIT. I think we were talking about it on the phone, and you said a REIT, and I said, "Can you repeat?"
Did I hear that right?
Yeah, did I hear that?
REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust.
Yeah,
which is a cool concept. Not everybody can afford. If people who want to invest in farmland but can't just afford to go out there and buy $1 million 80, a Class A or Class B tillable farm. So things like REITs or go ahead.
You mentioned that because they are a REIT, like you said, that they're traded, right? They are
publicly traded. Actually, they're on the S&P 500. I mean, you can buy stocks, you can buy shares in that company, just like you could Coca-Cola. I mean, it's or Ford or Chevy or you name it, So it's an interesting concept. They were the first one, I think, that ever went publicly traded like that. And it appears to be working well for him. I'd love to have Paul on sometime as a guest. That would be awesome. The dude could really educate the heck out of us in some of this kind of stuff.
I need a lot of that. Education.
We all do. Education is wonderful. But really an interesting concept. So I started to say, think about just real quick, somebody who wants to invest in farmland, but they maybe they didn't even grow up on a farm, so they don't have that much experience with it. So to them, it's kind of a foreign asset. It's not something that they've had a lot of experience with. So it's just maybe they're, not that comfortable going out and just picking a farm and saying, is this the farm I should buy? How much should I pay for it per acre? How do I make it produce as well as possible? And you could buy 10 farms and you would have a top producing farm and you would have a meh, so-so kind of class. And you might even, if you bought 10 of them, you might even end up with one of them in there that's kind of a pooch and didn't really perform as well or bring in as a higher rate of return, doesn't appreciate as well as the others and that sort of thing. But now let's think back to the guy who only afforded one farm. If that was all your budget would allow you to do, hopefully you get a good one, right? Hopefully you end up with that one that's the cherry on top instead of like, oh, I bought this one that I thought was going to be a good farm and it actually was not a fantastic investment. So land investors who have a substantial amount of capital have the advantage of being able to kind of hedge their bets. They're buying dozens of farms or they're buying hundreds of farms or whatever, right? So on average, land is a really good long-term investment. It's a great hedge against inflation. It can be made to return really well. It has a high level of appreciation. But even amongst farms, there's going to be some really, really good ones, a lot of pretty good ones, some so-so ones, and occasionally one that's just not very great, right? So what a REIT does essentially is let somebody who is interested in investing in farmland glean most of the benefits from that by investing in a company who's buying hundreds and hundreds of farms and managing them really well or trying to maximize because they have the head knowledge to be able to do that and the staff and the people to find really good tenants and build those types of relationships and all that sort of stuff. So that's how that business model works.
That seems like a great way for people that can't, like you said, for people that can't go out and buy a farm and get started and go and run it, or even if they were just the ones footing the bill for all the equipment and whatnot.
You'll never get the perks of actually like having dirt under your fingernails, like that part of land ownership.
But you still get to be involved.
You still get to the financial benefit of it, the long-term security that farm ownership allows us. And so it's, it is still, I guess, a way for somebody who sees farmland as being a fantastic investment, but doesn't have the wherewithal that, well, I don't even have $1 million. Maybe I only have 50,000 or 100,000, something, a portion of my retirement savings or whatever that I would love to just pull out of this mutual fund or out of the stock market and maybe put it into something that I feel is a little bit better long-term, safer, more secure investment, that if the whole stock market just turned upside down, farmland isn't going anywhere. And that's the general idea, I guess, with that. But, so that was the list, man, the top 5 of Illinois landowners, which was, couple surprises on there. But I guess, the take-homes for me on there are these are investors, obviously people who aren't just out there farming the ground themselves. And when people hear about all these big numbers to me, 12,000 acres even, or 17,000 acres, it sounds like tons, right? Tons of ground. Well, I know multiple family farm operations, even within our general vicinity, this part of Illinois, that are farming that many acres right now. They might not own outright that many acres. Some of them would own actually fairly close to it, but they lease a lot of other farms and whatever, and they're farming that many acres, just one family, and some employees and all of that kind of stuff. But that would be a big operation around here, but there's plenty of them that do it. So in the grand scheme of things, we're talking about a very small number of farms that are actually owned by these, this short list of high profile corporate entities and the
top 1%.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. The quote 1%, the people who, just have billions of dollars to invest in something. And if you had, let's just say, you had a couple $1 billion to your name, what would you do with it, Jordan?
Boy, I don't know if I can even start thinking about that. I don't know.
The list is long. This kind of goes back to
very long. Yeah.
The conversation we had with Kurt Geyer, right? It's the fantasy, I won the lottery or whatever. But let's just say it's easier to think if I won the lottery and let's say I won $20 million. Well, could probably figure out where to spend that pretty quick,
Yeah, I
or
mean,
what to do with it.
now that I actually think about it, I mean, first things first, buy the family farm for my grandparents because I'm 2 generations
First thing
behind.
he's going to buy, folks, is a farm.
That's first thing, and then it's going to be everything around it if I can.
Not all the land in the world,
Yeah,
just
but
just
just-
ours and everything that touches it.
just that stuff that's right around it because I'd love to see it's beautiful out that part
Yeah.
of that part of the area. I love everything about it. And there's a few families around that have taken really, really good care of the property and have just made it something to look at. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that the idea of being able to own all that would be right up there on top of the list.
Well, but so my point with that, I totally get where you're coming from, and I appreciate that, because I would say roughly the same thing. Would buy some of the family farms. I would help a lot of people out. Would help our church maybe with a big project and all kinds of cool stuff that you can do with that kind of wealth. But at a certain point, it's hard for us to conceive of or understand exactly how much money this really is. Millions of dollars. You could, if you have billions of dollars, you could heat your house with $100 bills. Like, you could just light it on fire and not it. A billion is so much more than a million.
Yeah.
Like, the common folk lose perspective of that. And so it's like, well, if you literally control all these companies and businesses, and you have stocks and own so many different things that are producing revenue for you, where does it all go? What do you do with it? So at a certain point, you would look for investments that are safe, secure, long-term investments, basically a piggy bank, a place that you could take some of that wealth and put it in a place that'd be really hard for anybody else to touch it. If the world just absolutely turned upside down, the stock market crashes, there's a world war or whatever. I mean, what could you invest your wealth in that would survive that? And land is one of the few things that does that for people. So it really, to me, it isn't that big of a surprise that some of like the uber wealthy, the billionaires that within our country and outside of our country, that they would want to invest in tillable farmland in the Midwest.
Absolutely. I mean, it just makes sense because, like you said, that's one of those things where it's something that when all things else go wrong, it is one of those things that we still are going to need no matter what, right?
We're still going to need it no matter what. And, so I think that's, it almost sounded there like I'm making a case for those people. Like, it's not still something to be just a little bit concerned about. And let's be real about the fact that if somebody who is off the farm is coming into the Midwest or to your state, your neighborhood, and they're buying up a substantial portion of the tillable farms that used to be owned by the friends and family members, the people that you grew up with or went to church with, or you've heard your grandpa tell stories about, it's concerning. Rightfully so, that you would think about who's controlling all of this land now at this point. And is this a trend that's going to continue to spike? I mean, are we just seeing the beginning of it, and it's going to get more and more and more the case every year until 10, 20, 40 years from now, when our kids and our grandkids are trying to buy a little piece in the country, all the ground around them is owned by these big corporations? Like, I think people are a little leery of it, to say maybe that's understating it, but they're a little bit nervous about the fact that they don't know where that's headed.
It's uncertain. It's
Yeah.
the uncertainty that I think that probably gets people the most, because it's like, I mean, if I were thinking about it, if I were the landowner and I thought about, if all that property around me got bought up and now it's just that 80-acre farm that's been in the family, and I may not get the option to ever buy all that stuff around it. Well, maybe they don't have the same interest in the area as I do, in the sense of what I want it to look like. If it's going to be farmland, or if it's going to be just native habitat for fauna or whatever, the wildlife there, that would be the concern for me, is the idea that maybe they're not going to have the same, what I believe the best interests are in the area. Right.
Right. No, 100% right. I mean, corporate farming is a bit of a threat to the family farm operation, or to the beginning farmer, somebody, some younger person who's really working their way up in part of an operation and trying to buy their first piece for themselves. To have that outside investor pressure, or have, bigger corporations that have maybe a couple $100 million budget to maybe $1 billion+ budget to invest in properties like that, because you're 100% right that they don't discriminate necessarily. They're not limited geographically to where they buy land. They can buy it in Mercer County. They can buy it in Pope County, Illinois, all the way at the southern tip. They could buy it in Indiana or Ohio or Iowa or Minnesota or Arkansas. And they do, And so what they're looking for are buying opportunities, good quality farms in areas where they think they would continue to appreciate over time. I mean, and I'm generalizing, but each entity is going to have their own set of like criteria that they're looking for, and will help shape what types of farms they're going to add to the portfolio. But if you're that local farmer, you're probably looking for land within 5 to 15 miles of home. You have an epicenter. You have a home base. You have your grain storage, or you have your livestock handling operation. All of your infrastructure is fixed in one geolocation. And then you're trying to buy land that's as close to that for logistical purposes as possible.
Moving equipment,
So
moving
the
people
time,
to it. Yep.
yeah, just the hours that you would spend driving back and forth to go to each of your pieces to check livestock or to move grain back and forth or get equipment onto that site to prep something, plant something, harvest something, spray it, whatever. And so this is the reason, though, that that in a nutshell is why 60+% of the farmland that sells the last couple of years in the Midwest is still being purchased by family farms. They're still buying the majority of it. Now, and all these record high prices that everybody is hearing about, or that, all this buzz is about lately, even in this area, hearing, $20,000, $22,000, $23,000 an acre in some, couple instances and stuff on some of these farms. That wasn't billionaire investors coming in to gobble up that ground. It was local farmers that paid the premium level price for it, because it was still worth more to them and their family farm operation than it was to anybody else. An investor isn't going to throw extra money at this farm based on its location because they don't care. They can go buy another one somewhere else where maybe there's not neighbors close by that just feel like they really have to have it.
And just because they've got those deep, deep pockets doesn't mean they're going to dig down into it just to get
right
that piece of property.
In most cases, I think the wealthiest people in America got that way by making pretty savvy business decisions with where they put their money. What seems like a good buy and what seems like just because I have buku dollars doesn't mean that I should overspend on an asset. You don't maybe necessarily just look for deals, but at best you want to pay fair market value. You don't want to pay some higher or premium or I hate to use the word inflated, but pay something over what market value maybe the baseline could have been. So generally it's still those local producers when you hear a really high record price, unless it's one of those instances where we hear about some future development coming in. And lately that development could be in the form of urban sprawl, urban pressure. Somebody's putting up a new Amazon warehouse or something. I saw last year there was a farm that sold out in New Jersey. I wish I could remember where I saw the article for it, but it sold for like $37,000 or $38,000 an acre. And it was hilly, kind of rocky, pasture, hay ground, maybe a little bit of tillable land with some creeks and stuff and some old barns on it. It was dairy country, right? It was just somebody's old, great grandpa's old farm that somebody else bought and inherited or whatever. And then finally when it sold and it went to auction, somebody bought it because it was right off the edge of this booming city at this point, and they were going to build an Amazon warehouse out there.
Wow.
Sad. I mean, it's sad to see the family story, the history of land ownership come to a conclusion in that case. But at the same time, like, it set that family up and their kids, their great grandkids. I mean, it changed their whole family tree, with that amount of money that came in for, thank goodness for great grandma and grandpa that settled that ground and built all of that and allowed it to stay in the family for that long, so that when its quote highest and best use actually changed to, okay, now this area is being developed and this is like the perfect site to build something like this. There's always like, I think inside, I mourn the loss of farms like that, but also in my mind, I understand that society will continue to develop, where whether we like that or not, our population continues to grow, our cities continue to grow. You have to have a place to put people,
and for
y-
them to work.
and you have to have jobs for them. I mean, that is the world that we live in, and it's always a changing, whether you like it or not, right?
Yeah, my biggest fear is that our little town of Aledo, Illinois, is going to start booming.
Booming
Yeah,
into a
which
mega metropolis.
yeah, because I want it to do well. I want there to be jobs. I want
Yeah.
there to be places for people to go and do stuff and spend their money. But it's like, boy, that's a lot of people. When you go to like the Quad City area or Chicago or
Yeah.
St. Louis,
Yeah,
or
you still
any of
want it to
those-
be a hallmark little town.
Yeah, I want to hang on to that for as long as I can, even though I know it's in the best interest for it to continue to grow. And there's been a lot of really good work done in our downtown.
There has in the county in general, but yeah,
Yep.
Aledo's doing awesome stuff, which is just really cool. I like my wife found this site online, and I'm gonna blank out and forget. I think this company, this business gal from Roseville, but she has these T-shirts and graphics and stuff that she sells that says "Save the Small Towns," and so Jackie jumped on that quick and was like, "Yes, this is us," And so you'll see her sporting some of those shirts, hoodies, and whatever that says "Save our small towns," and it's like I love that message. I mean, that we just kind of embody that, because saving our small towns, you could just as easily change that and say "Save our small farms," right? And I think that same message would pluck at just as many people's heartstrings. Because when we read articles like this, we hear about these people who are, these billionaires or investment corporations or whatever that are buying up all the farmland, our heart gets kind of shifted into worry gear, and we start just being like overwhelmed with this concern that like everybody's mom and pop farm, 80, 160, 240, these smaller outfits that still have grandpa out there feeding the cows every morning, and a couple of kids that now the farm doesn't make enough money to support them full time. So then they work, off farm jobs, day jobs, basically. But then they still, every night and every weekend, they're out there doing tillage work or helping, run the farm and
Run a
keeping,
grain truck,
right.
all that stuff.
Yeah. Which, to me is part of what makes rural America so great, and because there's so many people here in this area. We talked about this before, how when you get into an urban area, a bigger city, there becomes the disconnect from the family farm. There's the disconnect from where our food comes from. And it's because all of those people are more than 2 generations removed from all of those experiences. So what the small farms do is allow all of these farmers to, maybe one family, a husband, wife, couple, whatever, somebody still lives on and operates the farm, but then a lot of the other nuclear family members, like grown kids and whatever, they still participate. They still help. They still come on the weekends. They still take a week vacation and come at harvest time or whatever, and to kind of help make it all go. But they basically subsidize their income by finding another job somewhere else that helps pay the bills, right? But those people and their kids and their nieces and nephews and somebody, some other kid that's just neighbors with them down the street that gets to come out and ride in a combine with them, because of their relationship, ties so many people out here in rural America to the land, to the farms. And I think that's a kind of an easy thing to lose when a lot of the smaller farms eventually, in my generation, we had a lot of bigger farm operations, and by bigger in this area, I'm talking probably like 1,000 to 2,000 acres, not mega farms, not huge by any means, but good sized operations that was, most of the land was owned outright by the family. And a lot of the people that I went to school with in my grade and a couple of years, either way, one side or the other, graduating, this would be late 90s through the mid 2000 range, whatever. They went off to college, and then they went and got jobs somewhere else halfway across the country. They didn't come back. They didn't ever return to the hometown area to eventually be, to take over that family farm operation at some point. So when retirement day comes for dad or mom or grandpa, whatever, the farm gets sold. 9 times out of 10, that's what happens, because the people who would benefit from it, I mean, at that point, they need the revenue off of it, and that's kind of their retirement nest egg, but they could continue to live off of the revenue that it produced if they kept ownership and had family operating it. But when the family's not operating it, it pretty much has to sell. So when that happens, over time, we go from, early 1900s, when the average farm size in the Midwest was 80 to 100 acres, and people grew everything on it. They would grow corn, not very many soybeans or whatever back then, but it was mostly corn. But they might grow sorghum, they might grow potatoes or tomatoes, or they would have cattle, they'd have chickens and hogs and all that kind of stuff we've talked about before on one small operation. And then over the years, they got more niche oriented. They tried to figure out which part of that operation made them the most money. So they would quit doing pigs, or they'd quit doing hogs or whatever, and just kind of focus on the parts and try to do more of the stuff that they thought was making them the most financial gain. And they would do that by buying surrounding farms, buying more land. And so they grew from being 80-acre farms to 800-acre farms over a 50 or 60-year period. And when that happens, somebody's selling. So a lot of 80-acre farms had to be sold and absorbed by the guys who stayed in the game to become 400 and 800 and 1,200-acre farms. And now we're at this point where there's, a lot of family farm operations are hovering somewhere around the 800 to 1,600-acre mark in the Midwest, in Iowa and Illinois anyway. And they're doing very well, and they rent and farm some other pieces because their overhead is fixed. They have the buildings and the grain storage and the semi trucks and high dollar combines and all that stuff you got to pay for regardless. So you might as well be farming as many acres as you can manage, right?
Right.
And that helps them make more revenue to pay for it all. But eventually, if there isn't a plan of succession in place, those 800 to 1,600 acre farms are all going to be sold. If somebody in the family or somebody, that they're close with, there isn't a, hey, I'm going to help you get into this over the next 10 years and you're going to slowly buy me out, or you're going to, buy your siblings out, your cousins out, or whatever, somebody is halfway across the country now and doesn't care about farming anymore. If we're going to keep this going and it's going to be you or, a couple of you people or whatever that are doing it, if they're not having those conversations, then it's kind of inevitable that the day comes that there's a sale. And it might be that it splits up into small pieces and a couple other adjacent farms buy up the pieces. But these small farms can only get so big without the manpower to keep them going. And so at a certain point, they just kind of max out on size. And what's the next step? The next evolution to that is that it isn't small farms or family farm operations at all. It's the corporate farms that there's no limit to how big they can be, because they'll just outsource and hire people to run the equipment, or 20 years from now, there won't be that many people. And then combines and tractors and all that stuff will be autonomous, that's the stuff that terrifies me.
Yeah.
I don't
the robots taking over all the jobs, right? Yeah. Or
we could be worried about the billionaires buying farms that we're all, that American farmers are still the ones farming. But when it's all done by robots, that's a whole different.
It's a little nerve wracking.
Well, yeah.
We talked about the AI before. Think about if the AI got a hold of all of our food production. You know what I mean? But that's the things that can be scary.
Oh man, we should end on a high note because I don't want to keep people awake at night with this stuff. But before we do, I mentioned earlier we were going to touch real quick on the China topic. I brought him up, and then I told you I'd tell you about him later, and then I just avoided that conversation altogether. But I want to deliver because I said I was going to talk about him later. So a couple of points that we found in some of our Google searching talked about how much land China actually owns in the United States. And it's a interesting stat. And again, numbers are going to change. I would say maybe not daily, but weekly, monthly, whatever. So if we're looking at information, the U.S. Agricultural's report, the last one that came out really that was detailed enough on who owned what as far as foreign entities go, was not done until like fall of 2021. This is 2-year-old information that I'm talking about right now. But at that time, China owned roughly 384,000 acres of U.S. farmland. And of that, 195,000 acres was purchased by 85 Chinese investors. And the rest, the other 189,000 acres, was owned by a much larger number of people or entities from China. So it isn't necessarily like the Chinese government that's coming over here when we say China's buying up all of this, whatever. It's really not like the Chinese government coming over and just buying up big chunks of farmland. It's companies that in some cases were American owned and then were sold to China. And then China is using some of that capital that is generated here in the States through meat packing or production or seed genetics or whatever company, chemical production or sales, things like that. And they're reinvesting it in American land, in U.S. tillable farms. Is that, I'm not saying that's not concerning, because it definitely could be. But let's understand what the facts of it are, that it's not necessarily just like there's not a Chinese dictator that's buying up all of these tillable farms and is going to, build military bases on them or something. And let me back up. I want to be clear that I personally don't believe there's probably nearly enough oversight over that. But I know I'm not alone in that, because I know there's just even this year, there have been at least a couple of bills that were brought forth by some of our lawmakers that said we need more regulation and oversight over these foreign entities that are coming in and buying up tillable farmland. Because in the end, I mean, if these are some of them potentially entities that we're not necessarily friendly with, then you want to have control over your own ability to grow groceries, right? You certainly don't want to give that to one of your military adversaries. Right. So, rightfully so, the Department of Defense and Congress and some of these other entities have peaked some eyebrows lately, and they're paying a lot closer attention to it. And there's some bills in place and things. So it'd be really interesting to see like where this legislation goes over the next 6 to 12 months and whatever, and what comes of that. Maybe we need to give an update on that here at some point. But I do think that every time we list a tillable farm, I don't even think I can list one anymore without hearing somebody say, was China going to buy that? Or is going to, probably not. Probably not going to be Bill Gates that buys it either. But, let's be clear. We understand why people are concerned about that, and we definitely, I don't want to make light of the fact that, losing our family farm operations is a tragic thing. And I think anything we can do to preserve that preserves the integrity of rural America. It's kind of the fabric of what this part of our nation is all about. And I think we don't want to lose that part of our identity. I think if you operate a farm now and you hope that your kids or grandkids will continue to be involved in agriculture and continue to farm 50 or 100 years from now, then you need to be really concerned about that and be paying close attention to that. You also need to be focused on instilling that in that next generation, that set of values that they're going to need to operate a farm. It takes grit. It takes tenacity. It takes a connection with the land. And if you just send them all day long to town or to extracurricular activities that aren't necessarily agriculturally related, then you can't necessarily blame them when they turn 22 and get out of college and just want to move to the suburbs and go get a corporate job somewhere.
Yep.
That's real talk right there from Chase Burns.
It is.
So, Jordan, you got anything else on this topic? Did we beat it up enough?
I think you've done a pretty good job. And it's, we say that it's hard to be super impartial about it because we both live in it, right? But it's also, we don't want to say that it's just, it's terrifying. You said you don't want to have people staying up at night just because of what we're telling you, the numbers and whatnot. But, it's just, it's a hard topic, and it can be a little frightening, but it's also, I hope it gives people drive and motivation to, especially those that are looking to jump back into it or have been doing it or looking at the next generation. I think it's it's really important that they be looking at it all the time, be thinking about it all the time.
Oh, for sure. Yep. Great wisdom in that. Well, I think with that, we can probably wrap up episode 5 here, and we can look forward to, we got a cool guest coming in here. I think for the next week's episode that we'll be recording next week, we should have somebody in studio that's going to be a lot of fun to listen to and hear a really cool farm story. So also got some guests lined up after the first of the year that are going to probably take us back full circle around to homesteading, which I think is kind of where we started a lot of talk in our first episode, because my family here is really into the homesteading stuff too. So that'll be a lot of fun as well. Boy, there was a lot of information that came out of this episode. So hopefully people find all of that as interesting as we did, and there's some some good factual stuff in there. But it's something that we all need to be thinking about and be aware of, I suppose, and need to have more conversations about it. But it definitely is something we don't want people to stay awake at night worried about.
Right.
But speaking of getting some good information, we would love to have you guys go to Land Your Ground and subscribe in there so that we can have your email address to start adding you to our weekly updates. We're going to be sending out some emails that we're not going to spam you. We're not going to blast you guys. But if we could get your information in there and maybe even drop us a note telling us about your personal land story, we always want to hear about that. And we look forward to having you as part of that list so that we can stay in better touch with you, add value, and bring you more helpful information and articles as we move ahead.
And in addition to the website, you can also find us on all of our socials at Land Your Ground. That's going to be Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Spotify. You can find us there. You can like and subscribe to join our tribe.
And once again, thank you for joining us here on Land Your Ground.